I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
This was perhaps the moment that has defined Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East so far. In a surprise announcement on Tuesday, the US president said he's lifting decades-old economic sanctions on Syria's government after lobbying from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The impacts in Syria were felt immediately. Thousands took to the streets to celebrate what many Syrians feel was one of the main roadblocks in their pursuit to rebuild their war-torn country after the fall of the Assad regime in December. The U.S. has sanctioned Syria since 1979, when Hafez al-Assad was labeled a state sponsor of terrorism. It then ramped up those sanctions after his son Bashar al-Assad's brutal crackdown on anti-government protesters in 2011, as the country spiraled into civil war. The historic announcement was then followed by more unexpected news. Syria's new president, al-sharaa, would meet with Trump in person. Al-sharaa then flew to Riyadh on Wednesday, where the two leaders appeared to get along quite well. Donald Trump described the Syrian counterpart as a tough guy and a fighter, referring to his background as a rebel leader and fighter formerly associated with al-Qaeda in Iraq. Al-Sharaa's rebel group Hizb Tahrir al-Sham was previously designated by the U.S. as a terrorist organization with a $10 million bounty placed on his head. So what does this mean for Syria? Well, to tell us more, we're joined now by Syrian journalist and political commentator Siba Yasser Madwar. Siba, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Mohammed and Matilda. Good evening.
Now, let's begin with the reaction in Syria to this announcement. A few people saw it coming and the reaction was swift. How are Syrians feeling after this?
Yes, Mohammed, exactly what you said. It's like economic salvation. It's like the first step for recovery again, then not to rebuild actually Syria, to build Syria from the rubble. You know how much Syrians suffered for more than a decade, and also not only from 2011, actually also before the revolution. And we know the GDP contraction of over 70%, the lira, the Syrian pound lost more than 80 or 90 maybe of its value, and people are restricted to access a lot of products, a lot of essential goods, water, electricity, fuel, and a lot of stuff that we can consider it as like minimum we should have it. They don't have it. So more than 10 years. So lifting sanctions, it means for them, it means life. If you read some comments on social media, you will cry how people, they are really happy, say that, oh, again, we will eat chocolate, again, we will have oil, again, we will have fuel, again, we will see bank SWIFT, again, we can take the transaction money from our relatives, from our people outside without any commission for here and there in the black market. So it's a huge impact for Syrian people. Actually, it's like a blessing from the heaven to exactly for recovery and build their future they dream so long.
Now, I know that in the weeks and months after the fall of the Assad regime, there were millions of Syrians that went back home. And part of that was this idea that they needed to reinvest in their own country that had been cut off from the world for so long. Now, of course, as the government is attempting to bring back this country and rebuild it, investment from the outside is essential. What will this mean now for these conversations, this attempt to try and bring people from the outside to reinvest in the future of Syria?
Mohammed, yesterday, the Syrian president and transitional government now, Ahmed al-Sharaa, said in his very brief speech a very interesting point that he welcomed Syrian capitals from outside, and he welcomed also Turkish capitals, Turkish businessmen and Qatari businessmen, and from all the globe. So we can understand here that now he wants to release the economy to be a liberal economy as much as he can. But of course, we need restrictions, we need a legal framework, we need economic sovereignty, a lot of procedures we need. But in the first step, he knows that he needs money from outside, because actually Syria doesn't have any resources for now, or any economy can produce now a real economy. So this is very important, and I say again, and I think that also with this we need legal framework to protect Syrian businessmen in the first place. Again, Mohammed, lifting sanctions, it's not only for Syria, I think. It's not the step as this decision for Syria. It's a decision for the region and US. I think, and you know, Trump is not only peacemaker, and he doesn't want to only to be a peacemaker, but he deal maker. So from this decision, he knows that there are a lot of interest inside Syria represent for America first, as his doctrine in all decisions he takes in America or outside. And here we can talk more, if you want, geopolitically, regionally, and also about Syria and its future with the neighbors and in the region. We can see exactly the new Middle East, exactly new actors, exactly new allies, and exactly new ties between these actors.
Now, let's talk about the Syrian president, Ahmed al-sharaa. Now, just not long ago, the United States had a $10 million bounty on his head. Now, here he is meeting with the president of the United States. What did you make of this meeting?
Mohammed, if we read the history, we can see a lot of examples like this. Let's remember Jerry Adams from IRA. And his friend from Sinn Féin, Martin, remind me his surname. Okay, Magnus, I think. So they were labeled terrorists, and then the negotiation happened, and peace done with them, and then they met the Queen. So everything changed and can be changed. And negotiation, it's for to talk to your enemies and have like common space between them. So people also change. So, and Ahmed al-sharaa, in our example, in our case in Syria, we see Ahmed al-sharaa really has shown a lot of dramatic changes in his attitudes and in his vision for Syria. And we can't say that he was terrorist. He just what he did inside Syria. And he said in many times that he was just only against Assad and the regime. So, and again, what he did, and in 5 months before that, he's trying to make agreement with Kurdish forces and with the Druze as well. And he gave a lot of pledges and tried to say and actually take actions about this nation for all Syrians. So I think that gives a lot of signs for the US, and that there is a opportunity. And also don't forget that the support from region, especially Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey, they know that they need stable Syria, and they need stable security for a lot of issues in the regions. That's why Ahmed al-sharaa may be the only man now can understand the all factions inside Syria and can feel the emptiness and vacuum in Syria. So I think regardless the history, regardless the decisions during Obama and Biden eras. So now we are witnessing different era, different shift in the geopolitical landscape in the region, in the mindset, of course, of foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East.
Now, I just want to make a small note about Jerry Adams. You mentioned him. He has always denied having any connection to the IRA officially, but I do take your point. Nelson Mandela is a great example of somebody who was designated as a terrorist in this country, in the United Kingdom, and then, of course, celebrated as a civil rights hero. Now, President Trump was also asked about whether he thinks Syria will normalize ties with Israel. Let's have a listen to what he said.
Yeah, but I think they have to get themselves straightened out. I told him, I hope you're going to join when it's straightened out. He said yes. But they have a lot of work to do.
This has been a controversial, decision. There's been pressure from the U.S. on al-sharaa to take some steps towards normalizing with Israel. Of course, Israel has been bombing Syria over the last couple of months. Do you think this will happen? And if so, how would Syrians react to it?
Mohammed, we don't know until now if it will happen or not. It's not like yes, no answer, or it's not like overnight. You know that this is very sensitive and complex issue. And al-sharaa can't decide by himself only. He is chosen by coalition and many revolutionaries. So this decision should be studied among a lot of people, actually, a lot of who are in the cabinet now. So we can't say maybe it will happen, maybe not. We don't know. Everything changed, but we need to see signs. I think if it will happen, it will not happen in the way that happened with the other countries in the region. We maybe see like non-engagement agreement or incremental agreement or incremental normalization, something like only related to security, that security ties maximum now, because the mood still in Syria, people, public opinion is still not prepared for this step, and Ahmed al-Sharaa knows how much this issue can be sensitive in the street and among people and in public opinion. But let's see it, wait and see. And we heard that what the White House announced about that, Donald Trump urged for that. But again, I don't think that it will happen overnight. It takes a lot and long way to pave the way, and it needs a lot from also Israel. So I don't think that will happen, or maybe at least not in the short time.
Siba Yasser Madwar, we appreciate your time. Syrian political commentator and broadcaster. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, Matilda.
Now, following yesterday's meeting in Riyadh, Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa called the decision by Trump to lift sanctions historic and courageous, saying it will alleviate the suffering of Syrian people and lay the foundations for stability in the region.
ولن تكون سوريا بعد اليوم ساحة لصراع النفوذ ولا منصة للأطماع الخارجية، ولن تسمح بتقسيم سوريا، ولن نسمح بتقسيم سوريا، ولن نفسح المجال لإحياء سرديات النظام السابق لتفتيت شعبنا. سوريا لكل السوريون، سوريا لكل السوريين بكافة طوائفها وأعراقها، ولكل من يعيش على هذه الأرض المباركة. التعايش هو إرثنا عبر التاريخ، وأن الانقسامات التي مزقتنا كانت دائما بفعل التدخلات الخارجية، واليوم نرفضها جميعا.
That was Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa. Meanwhile, Donald Trump left Qatar this morning for Abu Dhabi, the final leg of his week-long visit to the region. The U.S. president will look to discuss a number of investment deals with the UAE, including a controversial F-35 fighter jet deal previously sidelined under the Biden administration. This follows Trump's announcements of $240 billion deals inked in Qatar that include the purchase of 200 American-made Boeing 787 Dreamliners, as well as a $142 billion weapons deal with Saudi Arabia, part of a larger set of investments in the energy and AI sectors. Now, to tell us more, we're joined by MEE reporter Mohammed Saleh, who is in Doha. Mohammed, thank you for joining us.
Hello, Mohammed. Thank you for having me.
So tell me, you've been here in Doha for the last day while Trump has been in town. Doha's a small place. What's the atmosphere been like?
The atmosphere is quite clear that Trump is in town. As you can see behind me, there's several US flags lining most of the roads, most of the main roads. When Trump arrived, a lot of the roads were closed as Doha is a small place. There's a sense of, I think at the start there was a bit of a sense of slight bit of anxiety as to what the trip will constitute. But he left and I think we're interested, yeah.
Now, there were many hopes that a lot of geopolitical issues that are hanging over the region, the ceasefire in Gaza, the Iran deal, the relationships with the Houthis would be resolved, but it seems that Trump had different priorities in mind. What do you make of his trip so far?
I mean, it was a very quick visit. It was 2 days in Saudi Arabia, 2 days in Qatar, and now 2 days or maybe a day in the UAE. So that's a relatively short time to solve some of these very complex issues. But Trump came with both his businessman hat on and his kind of presidential diplomatic hat on. But it seemed he, I would say, used the businessman kind of role a lot more. He made several huge deals in both Saudi Arabia and in Qatar, and we're yet to see what comes out of the UAE. In Saudi Arabia, we were kind of hearing that there would be that golden $1 trillion of Saudi investment into several American sectors number, but it was about $600 billion by the end of it, which of course is still huge. And in terms of the diplomacy, I think the move to lift sanctions off of Syria was huge, and him meeting Ahmed al-sharaa, president of Syria, was another big deal. But then there was the other topics, such as getting a ceasefire in Gaza, considering that the Qataris are leading the diplomatic and negotiation efforts. Additionally, a potential nuclear peace deal with Iran. Qatar is pushing for that heavily. The Emir, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, he mentioned that the Qataris would be keen for that, but it seems neither of these were achieved. In terms of the business transactions with Qatar, as you mentioned, there was the deal with Boeing, which is the biggest deal in Boeing's history. And then there was an additional $10 billion worth of investment, Qatari investment, in the US airbase, the Al Udeid airbase, which is the biggest US airbase in the Middle East. So there were many striking kind of moments that stood out. But on the diplomatic side, we can have a bit more of a discussion about that.
Let's dig a little bit more into what's happening with Gaza and the ceasefire. We heard threats from Benjamin Netanyahu that he is going to send in the army for a more intensive attack than we have seen over the last 2 months since he unilaterally broke that ceasefire. There's been tensions between him and Trump, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely, I think those tensions between him and Trump are being felt in several places. Firstly, the US starts negotiating with Hamas almost directly through the mediators in Qatar and in Egypt, and they Hamas releases one hostage, one captive. Forgotten his name, something Alexander.
Eden Alexander.
And that, pardon?
Eden Alexander, that was his name.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of pushes Trump to the sidelines a little bit, and that obviously pushes Netanyahu to the sideline, and that frustrates Netanyahu, and that frustration is felt immediately in Gaza, where there were several massacres, deadly, huge massacres over the past couple of days. Several hospitals were bombed in the past 48 hours. That's a massive, massive escalation. The famine is ongoing, the starvation is ongoing due to Israel's complete blockade of Gaza, which is now into its 75th day. So these and Trump getting closer to, he's already very close to some of these Middle Eastern leaders, particularly the young ones, MBS and Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. So these kind of things frustrate Netanyahu, and the direct negotiation between the US and Hamas, this pushes Netanyahu to the sidelines. And that would discourage him more from going into more negotiation for a potential full ceasefire deal, which is something the Qataris were pushing for. So this relationship between Trump and Netanyahu is looking not great, and the ramifications for that are unfortunately very deadly. And Netanyahu, of course, the war going on is a political survival for him. So there's many factors at play.
And we'll keep an eye on the situation as it evolves. Mohammed Saleh in Doha there. Thank you so much for joining us.